us to the final movie of the day and the most recent, 2024's technically a short film, but Chime. And I'm sorry, Amber, to leave you with this one.
Well.
Can you?
There's not a whole lot.
I'm not sure you can synopsize this, but yeah.
No, Chime follows a cooking class, a cooking or food tech teacher called Matsuoka, who has a odd student in his class who starts acting erratically, claiming he can hear a chime, like a chime noise in his head. This student does something strange, and then Matsuoka starts hearing the chime, and he starts doing something strange, and then it finishes. And that's all I can say.
Yeah, this is this is horror in abstract, really, isn't it? It's kind of horror with all of the context taken out. So it's just sort of the pure abstract ideas behind what makes these scenes tick. But there's just no reason for them. We don't have any sort of coda for why people might be doing it or what the chime is. It's just, here's some spooky stuff and some atmospheric stuff. And it does have some very chilling scenes. Like there's a murder with a young student, which is about as grisly as anything I've seen Kiyoshi Kurosawa ever do. And it's so matter-of-fact the way
it's really down. Horrible. It's very... The way she, like, the shock, you know, and it's juxtaposed with that, him cutting up this chicken before, and this, like, ripping flesh, and then her shock when it happens, and she just screams over and over again. It's very... I think, you know, we were just talking about how funny Kurosawa can be at some points, but I think Chime is, like, void of any... Like, there's nothing nice in this short. It's, like, his most... If you took all of Kurosawa's themes, you know, apathy, nihilism, cultural violence, you condense them down into one little short. Chime is, like, a perfect saturation of his themes. And I think since watching it, like, in a quote-unquote, I know we're not post-pandemic, but to a lot of people, we are post-pandemic, it becomes even scarier, these themes of, like, people desperately trying to connect with one another, but not being able to, and simultaneously becoming more and more isolated and weird. And it's just really scary. Very scary film.
I think there is some comedy in when the teacher who's trying to get out of teaching and he's basically doing these like job interview with like a fancy restaurant. But even then there was because he has like, we see two different interviews basically. And the first interview is like sort of fairly ordinary, and the second one is sort of a mix of comedy and dread-inducing because by that point he's starting to act weird, but he's also completely tanking his interview because basically he just keeps talking about himself. He can't like talk about the future, which is basically what they're asking to do. Is like, what are you actually going to do for us? And again, it's that like you said, about that connection thing. He can't think about what he's just thinking entirely about his own existence, about what he is able to do for himself, and which is scary because you see that you've already seen that already with the younger student who sort of passes on the chime, as it were. And I think as you mentioned about like the idea of like post-pandemic, quote unquote, it's interesting people talk about like how can we do like a COVID horror film, and I think for me, this is a good example, and like Cure as well, in terms of like rather than a literal infection, like a mental infection is probably like the more scarier and more. It's probably the best way of doing it, really, because I think if you try and do a literal infection, people will just know what you do, whereas that sort of mental infection that's directly attacking your sense of self and changing your how you interact with the world. That's what's scary with Chime. And also you get that classic Kurosawa shot of an empty hallway, which is scary. But you don't really know why, but then you do. You think
it's horrible. Maybe it's that switch to digital, because I don't know crap about films, but I'm assuming he switches to digital for that last bit. Again, I'm trying not to. Well, you can't really spoil it. He hears a knock at the door, and then the camera like warps and goes weird. He goes outside. The world is empty. there's this horrible noise. The camera, it almost feels like found footagey. And then it's really strange. It like very switches the style, and then he looks back at that hallway, and again, it's that the scariest place in the whole world is your own home. And very scary.
I think he definitely switches at that point, whether it's from analog to digital or he just changes the digital ISO, but it just becomes so much grainier and staticky and washed out in that cut as he steps out of the house. It's that's arguably the most terrifying thing in the whole short.
Yeah,
certainly on a first watch, when that happened, I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?"
Yeah, there's the noise as well, and it's just again this fear that someone. It reminded me of this little like short 2-sentence horror story where it's like the last man on Earth sat in a room and there was a knock at the door, and he gets this like the chime, the ding dong, and the doorbell, and there's nothing, the whole static thing, and then he goes out and in this Japanese street is desolate. Nothing. Where's his family? Where's the friends gone? Like nobody is there. Who is this man?
You kind of get an impression from his movies as well that he hates his kids. Sorry.
I don't think he hates his kids. I think he's aware that the world is a very scary and dangerous place for children and women to an extent, and then men. I think he, like I said, I think he just thinks the world sucks. But he does, the boy in this, the first boy to be infected, presumably, I think they're either, they're high schoolers or college students. They're very young. And then there's that great scene where his own home life, his own son, like does that really weird laugh at the dinner table, and then there's a scene later where he's like gaming and he just like turns to the camera and does this like, we need to talk about Kevin smile. Yeah.
Also, it's in this and in
he also kills one in Retribution as well, kills a kid.
Yeah, it's true. But was it with kids being like asked for like thousands of yen? Why? How is this a thing that happens with like Japanese?
Yeah, it's 200,000 yen, which is and then how many dollars?
It's about $200, maybe $200-$300. I mean, the yen is crap right now, so probably more. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it. I read that kind of thing as this comment on. Again, the Japanese family unit and how the fear that it must bring to a father who's meant to provide for you see this a lot in Tokyo Story, the shame of a father who can't provide for his family, especially in Japan at this time, is really quite scary. But then also it's like this comment on how the kids these days, like the youth is also scary as well, because like what the hell are these kids doing with this much money?
Yeah, weird. And and like Andrew says, there was a ghost, which is
there was a ghost, but this is the best example in any Kurosawa movie I've seen of the old adage about what you don't see is scarier than what you do see. And
absolutely.
This is the most minimal ghost story ever. People are just like, oh, this girl who at this point in the story is dead for sure. You know that. This girl's waiting for you upstairs. He just goes in. There's an empty chair. People are like, that's weird. She was there a second ago. And then the whole rest of the scene is just played out in people's faces as they look quizzical. And then they notice something. And then they just start screaming. And he screams in like... It's the best scream I've ever seen in terms of you genuinely believe he's having a complete mental collapse.
It's horrible, yeah.
And the best bit about that as well is like when you first come into the room, you don't see the chair straight away. You just see them looking in the corners. So you're just all bracing like, oh, what's going to be there? And then it's just the chair. It's like, okay, so she's just gone. And then, like you said, it's sort of the woman starts screaming and leaves the room, and then he starts screaming, and it is just,
And then it's never mentioned again.
Yeah, that just happens.
I feel like this whole movie is basically him taking all the techniques that he'd learned over time and pushing them all to 11.
Yeah,
and at the sacrifice of having a coherent plot or like an easily intelligible plot, at least. Instead, it's just like, no, everything I know that works in terms of technique, I'm going to move it out one by one, crank everything up to 11. They're saying something horrific. Not going to say what it is. Yeah. Tough shit. Moving on. And just being like, I think I can get away with that for 45 minutes. And he absolutely does. If it was 90 minutes of this, there would come a point in the second half where you'd be like, I want to know what the answer is. But I think at 45 minutes, you can just run through to the end, roll credits, and be like, that was brilliant.
Yeah. That was incredible. It was so good. Yeah. There's a line very early on when the first Chime boy, he says, there's a machine in my head. It tells me what to do. And I was like, oh, okay, I know where this is going. It's going to be like, again, it's going to be like a cure, a mind control thing. And then I was like clinging on to that as my hopes drifted away. And I understood it less and less. And I was like, there's going to be something soon, right? And then nope.
Yeah.
Finished.
I think he's fascinated with a variety of different mental disorders. And in a number of his films, there will be someone who has a variation on a real life psychiatric condition that he will, maybe adjust and re-engineer for the purposes of the plot or for working as working in a genre movie. But in this, the boy who says, "Oh, half my brain's been replaced by a computer and it tells me what to think, but I've kept half a human brain, so I'm still rational." I was just like, oh, this is a movie that's going to be like a metaphor for schizophrenia or something. But then he imparts the idea and then just, without giving too much away, just moves on. Like there's no chasing that down the rabbit hole. It just moves on to something else. Later on, he has his female student who can't bring herself to cut up a chicken because something about it is, for want of a better term, incredibly uncanny to her. She has like a visceral reaction of uncanniness. And the reason is she doesn't have the ability to properly conceptualize what it is. It's like it's an object and it's food and it was alive, but now it's dead and I'm supposed to cut it up. But if I was cutting up an actual chicken, that would be horrific. But instead I'm cutting up some food. And this kind of inability to properly, balance these categories or make them make sense in terms of each other and fit together neatly in her head just leaves her completely floundering. And then she says, the more I look at it, the more human it looks. So like her categorization of what's human versus what's not human, which is kind of like what the earlier male student had when he said half his brain was a computer, that starts to collapse as well. She can't tell the difference between human, not human, real, unreal, food, object, and the kind of interference that all the categories run on each other, overlapping and not cohering, causes her to just lock up. And it reminded me of something that I've seen people do, and I did myself once, which is, I don't know if anyone on this episode, have you ever done that thing where you have a mirror and you just stare at your face in the mirror for as long as you can?
Yeah.
And you do that and you kind of try and trance out and lose yourself. And at a certain point, your face becomes not your face. It just becomes like a blob of flesh and bone with a hole, with a hole in the bottom. And you just freak out completely.
Who is this?
And it's not anymore. It's like flesh with holes in it, and you just and you have to just.
It's horrible.
It's really horrible. I recommend it if listeners.
You gotta get on this. You gotta get on this.
It's
listeners.
like you push yourself to the edge of psychosis just by looking in the mirror. And that's what it reminded me of. When she said, the more I look at it, the more it looks human, I was like, whoa.
Yes. That makes so much... I hadn't even thought of that till you said it, but that makes so much sense. It's kind of that failure to recognize the organic as well. This kind of like... honestly, it reminded me of Pulse in a lot of ways, because it is this sense that maybe young people or people in general can no longer recognize organic material in front of them, and maybe there's like a little hint of true crime in there too. She looks at a corpse and she immediately sees a human corpse. But yeah, it definitely reminded me of machines and technology taking over. And I think the fact that he chose to, and I've got beef with this, he chose to release it as an NFT.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, Mike, that's how we're supposed to have watched it. So you did know that. It just, I don't know. In one part of me is like, oh, that was a conscious choice to make a comment on the state of like how we can no longer separate technology from the organic, like in Pulse. Hey guys, remember Pulse? But then another part of me is like, did my man just sell out? Like, what happened? Because it's gross.
Yeah. I don't picture him as an NFT, bro, in the scheme of things. But weirder things have happened.
He didn't know. He didn't know what's going on.
It's for how else am I going to get this 45 weird little shorts out?
If I was him, I would have said, look, if it's getting it made, great. I'll take the money. I'll make it. I kind of expect this is going to end up in various places on the internet where it shouldn't be. And that's their problem, not mine. I mean, fair play.
Yeah.
And that fits with the themes as well. Again, it fits with these themes of like the boundaries between technology and the real world blurring, and this move away from like physical objects and into weird data.
Yeah. Because even like the first kid, he sort of was like, "Oh, I took this class just to get distracted."
Yeah.
And there's the bit where he's like chopping onions. He's like chopping it way too fine.
Yeah.
It's that idea. He just wants to just get away from reality while also connecting to reality at the same time. It's
Definitely.
Very interesting.
There's another example.
It's like
when he's first talking to that first student. And the student's talking about the chime he hears in his head, which is, I think he describes it as a noise that's like a scream, but not a human one. At that point, I think it's the first example, but it's one of several examples of the light from the train outside.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, this reminds me of the flickering light from the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And it really does like act as a harbinger of bad shit about to go down. Like every time you see the lights from the train like rushing past, reflected on the surface of the wall or the cupboards they're standing by, or whatever, it means that something bad is happening or has just happened or is about to happen. And the weird thing is the positioning of the lights is nowhere they could really be coming in through a window. So it's like, also it looks like a bunch of train windows rushing past, but I don't see how that would work. Like it's the light from inside the train or it's the light reflected off the train.
I think it's the train, like the bits in between the train windows, like blocking the sun. But it doesn't, logistically, it doesn't make sense. And Andrew, what you were saying earlier about like epilepsy as well, that how much of a huge trigger would that be? Like for me personally, I get migraines when you're in the car and the trees on the side of the road like flick the light. And when I was watching Chime, I was like, oh my God, I can't look at this because I'm going to get like a migraine. It's all about that something that like triggers your brain to change, isn't it?
Photosensitive epilepsy. And like I say, if I ever got a chance to interview him, or if any of you guys ever get a chance to interview him, please ask him if he has any thoughts on photosensitive epilepsy, because I feel like he does.
Yes.
The other thing is the wife as well. Another example of a wife having a bad time.
Another sad wife.
And another almost, I think the wife would really fit in, I'm going to mention it again, Twin Peaks: The Return. She's one of those characters where she's not really a character as such. She's more like a concept or a texture or a vibe. And the way she's constantly just stopping what she's doing and going and taking like multiple bags of garbage.
Of cans.
What is that about?
Well, Amber and I both lived in Japan, and I'm sure Amber will recognize the kind of strict, very strict local regulations about gomi or garbage, where it's like you need to put this in this kind of bag and this in that kind of bag, and you take it out, but only at this time of day can you take it out and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and the way
it's not a joke.
It's not a joke. And neighbors police each other. Like if you take it out in the evening instead of first thing in the morning, people will come and have a quiet word with you.
Yes, they will.
Really well. So this kind of garbage and taking out of garbage as being a kind of metaphor for social duty, I think makes sense. But the way she goes about it, where she just stands bolt upright, takes out more cans than they could possibly have used in even 2 weeks.
How much are these families
I guess
drinking?
if the boy's playing video games, I guess that's what he's just
possibly. But the clatter of them again.
Oh my god! Yes, the noise is horrible.
Just the swap boxes and
it really reminded me of the textures of Twin Peaks: The Return, where he just plays with the audio and the vibe and the tactile sense. It's almost like anti ASMR. Like it's not a nice sound. It's just like, here's some rattling to piss you off. She just stands there blank-faced and shakes her head.
The chime itself, I don't know. I need to look into this because I swear I have heard that chime sound used, and this is going to make me sound really lame. I've heard it used on a creepypasta about the back rooms, and I don't know if anyone knows about the back rooms, but they are like I don't think they're 4chan, maybe like a Reddit creepypasta about these liminal spaces. But I swear I listened to one once on YouTube, and that chime, like that very specific one, was playing throughout it. I don't know where if KK like got that sound effect but it's weird because that's not the scream. It's it's a doorbell. I think it's a doorbell. Andrew, I don't know if your doorbell in Japan sounded the same, but mine kind of did sound like that.
A little, yeah.
Ding dong. I mean, that's just any.
But it's weird. I mean, you hear that noise, but then the guy earlier says, "Oh, I can hear a chime." It sounds like a scream, but not a human scream. Then when you hear it, it's more like a ding dong. Yeah, nothing. Another example of things not quite joining up in this, which is something I really liked. But I really liked it because, like I say, you can do that in 45 minutes and just really push the vibes as opposed to the plot resolution.
Yeah, it's like Kurosawa speed run. If you just want an injection of pure Kurosawa, just put this in your face and that'll sort you out for the day.
Oh, it's the hard stuff.
Yeah. I need my hit.